Everybody, welcome to our webinar about 7 underutilized eBacon features you can start using today to save more time. Just a couple housekeeping items. If you have any questions, you can use the question. There's like a way to ask questions inside the webinar. Since we have a lot to go over, we might not answer questions right between each slide or whatever, but we will have time at the end. If you have more time, we have more time for you at the end. Also answer any questions and go into any details that you're looking for. And Aubrey and I will be kind of going back and forth here. So without further ado, we'll get started. So who are we? So Aubrey, do you want to introduce yourself real fast and tell us who you are?
Hi, everybody. I'm Aubrey Roach. You may or may not know me. I'm the Director of Client Services over here at eBacon.
And as it says in here, she is a grandma and doesn't just cosplay one. If you look at her website, you can see her awesome photo. And even though that she dressed up for Halloween like that, that's her usual dress. So just be aware of that. And my name is Alex Kramer. I'm the VP of Product Development. I've worked on eBacon for the last 15 years, building up a lot of what you see on the front end and the back end of our technology side. And as it says, I actually do only have like one really nice shirt. I've been trying to get out of that hole, but it's been difficult with my lifestyle. So let's get into this. So what are we going to learn today? We're going to really focus on 7 things that we don't really see a lot of customers leverage, but that could help them quite a bit. We're going to focus on workforce management items, employee tracking tools, human resource software that you can leverage, and then we want to talk a lot about how you can actually like start using these things, because one thing we find is that it's great to have all these super cool features, but from your position in the business, how do you actually leverage these and how do you actually get these things started? That's always a difficult problem. And then who at eBacon can you contact as a resource to start working on these features? So make sure nobody's having a problem here. There's no questions. We'll get started on this stuff. So the first one is our scheduling system. So when we look at each one of these features, what I would like to tell you about is like why you'd want to use them, what it really works best with, and then what's least used in those features if you're using them today, and then where do you face the most resistance in actually getting these on to your team. So scheduling system, eBacon has spent a lot of time really ramping up our scheduling system to put a ton of new features and benefits in there for your workforce. If you were on our last webinar about the new features that came out, one of the things that you would see is like the new by job feature, which allows you to kind of sort everything on the left side of the screen by the job instead of just by the employee. But we've actually made a ton of improvement to just the quality of life of using the scheduling system too. We find that the scheduling system works best with customers who are leveraging our time intense product, who are using time off. If you have a team member using like an Excel spreadsheet or like texting people schedules, our system's great. And then if you have really mobile workforces, we've just actually launched a new feature recently that allows you to add like attachments to your schedule. And those attachments show up on the app for that employee too. So if you have to, let's say, dispatch somebody, if you're like, hey, I've got 3 jobs tomorrow and there's a work order on each job, and right now you're just texting that employee that information, you might want to look at the scheduling, the new scheduling features we've released. And we actually have some new scheduling features we're going to be coming out with in the next 2 to 3 months, which might be even more exciting if that's the structure thing you're doing. One of those least leveraged features in scheduling today is publishing. This is a feature that's an optional option, which allows your team to kind of edit the schedule and then hit a publish button. And it sounds like a very small thing, but like the default version of the scheduling system is that the employees see changes as they happen, which for some companies you want, but for some other companies you might want to be working on next week's schedule off and on, and then you hit publish, and then they can see the changes on that schedule next week. And last, resistance. We've actually found that the employees are usually not the resistant one when it comes to scheduling, because they're already kind of like the end of it. They don't have to actually do a lot of the scheduling themselves. They just have to follow the schedule of what you put in place for them. And they'd rather be notified quickly. We actually find that managers are generally quite resistant to scheduling changes because they typically have a process in place, and it just is kind of difficult for them to um, move that process out of Excel or out of a texting. So when you're looking at implementing this, if you want better systems on that side, you have to really focus on those managers. The second thing is expense and mileage. I'd say that probably less than like a third of our customers are really leveraging the expense and mileage system. A lot of the times, we see that customers still kind of have a paper process or just like, email this to me instead. And for the expense and mileage systems, this allows digital receipts and mileage requests to be paid through payroll and synced to your general ledger. So if you are wanting to pay your employees out faster and get that information in the system quicker, you'd want to use our expense and mileage systems to do that. In this instance, typically the resistance, employees have to submit these to you, right? And as with a lot of things in the world, like the employees are going to do what's the least resistant to them to do. So if they can pull an app out and use it, they typically are just as happy as taking a picture, submitting an email, and that kind of stuff. They'd also rather be paid faster on the things that they pay for their own buckets or out of their own wallet. So when we look at resistance, a lot of times this is just more of time constraints. Like it's a matter of sitting down and getting it organized, making sure people know about it, making sure people are using the system, which we'll talk a little bit later on how to get people to use it. Who's this work best with? Mobile teams that send in a lot of receipts. If you have a team that is constantly sending in receipts or on the road, then leveraging this on the app is a massive benefit. If you have credit card allowances or issued credit cards, you can actually, as one of our least favorite or least leveraged features, you can actually add an option for credit card reimbursement. That credit card reimbursement does not go into payroll, but allows you to get those receipts as if they were emailing you them. And then if you're doing a lot of job costing, you can turn on and off the job option on their expense so that you can cost it out to your job too. Same thing on the mileage, you can actually cost the mileage out. And I think we recently actually added like the subtasks in the mileage too. So all these things have those options to kind of flow through your payroll and general ledger system. So you can get those expenses and receipts and mileage in the right way that you want to do that. Asset management. So moving on to some more kind of just tracking features. Asset management lets you keep track of physical assets assigned to employees and then reduce the risk by getting digital sign off when assigned to them. So assets are, as I said, anything physical. So if you give an employee a laptop, or if you give them a docking station or a monitor, or let's say you give them a phone, if you're keeping track of that today in like just an Excel spreadsheet, our asset system is actually a great place to just kind of move that stuff to a digital format. But also it gives you the ability to have employees see what they have too. A lot of times employees are like, what did I, what equipment did I actually have, right? And you can see there's a widget on their dashboard. This is my asset widget that actually has 7 assets that I've got from the company. And it would give me a list of just all the assets I have. Additionally, this feature allows you to get employees to sign off on those assets. So each time an asset's assigned to them, they get an email and they have to acknowledge that email, and it will tell them what the value is and what the consequences of not actually turning that back in is going to be. Least leveraged, we actually have an all asset screen. So if you manage a lot of assets, we've released a new screen that you can reach out to us and we can turn on for you. That allows you to see like all your assets at one time. And that screen allows you like kind of move assets between employees. So like if you just have like the computer I have right now I'm working from, which is a company computer, and you want to just move that to, let's say, Aubrey, then you could just go and find that asset, transfer that to Aubrey, super easy. You can do that on the employee screen too, but sometimes it's nice just to see all your assets at one place on that side. And then a lot of, again, resistance on this, like this is more of an administrative process. So a lot of it comes down to time constraints from managers or administrators, just not having the time to implement it or just having kind of a legacy process in place. If you do have a spreadsheet that you're using to keep track of assets today, you can actually import that through our data import wizard, and it lets you map those columns in and get that stuff imported. So there's a couple ways you can get that in quickly and then start leveraging an online version of the system. Again, one of our team members can help you out on how to do that.
And
Uh,
Alex, real quick, I just wanted to let everybody know these items that we're showing you, like he was talking about, like with the assets and everything and the expenses, there are actual reports that you can pull as well to see all of these items. And then like with the expenses, those receipts are actually attached to the employee profile, but you can also run a report on it.
Absolutely. And on top of that, all the things that we're talking about are generally already included and turned on. So you don't really need to, you can talk to us about how to get it in there, right? But they're already on the screen, or a lot of these are already on the screen, or just need some configuration. Moving on to certifications. Certifications help you keep track of required certifications and get alerts when employees come close to certs expiring. So certifications can be anything from, like, we need this OSHA card to in the technology sector, we have different security certifications that our team gets that we want to keep up to date. This system is best if you're like using electronic onboarding, and then anyone that has to verify certifications before work can be done. The nice thing about certifications is that it shows up pretty quickly in your on the left side. So if an employee does not have a certification, or let's say if an employee's certification is expiring, you actually can see it on the left side. You can actually filter on the left side of the employee screen on people who have certifications expiring, so you can quickly get to the list. You can run reports, as Aubrey says, define that also. So if certifications are important to your business and you're not already leveraging our thing or using an Excel spreadsheet, again, this is another tool that really helps you on that side. On that too, the manager and the manager and the administrator will also get an email as people get closer and closer to expiring their certifications. Least leverage features, continue education credit tracking. Employees and you can keep track of how many continue education credits are required for their certifications. So if you do have a certification, I know like things like SHRM and stuff like that have like a number of CEs required. You can leverage our system to keep track of that, especially if you're paying for those certifications for that employee, so that they can see how many are done and how many are required and that kind of stuff. And then time constraints, a lot like assets, certs are generally either tracked in emails or Excel. So moving over just takes some time to get set up. And then you can also have employees actually add the certs themselves and kind of have that be more self-service on that side too. So again, we don't really see a lot of resistance from employees on that side. It's more just like a time constraint of getting it going.
One area that is, oh, hold on one second. One area that the certifications that could be really helpful are for sexual harassment trainings. So having that in there, knowing when your employees are due for their sexual harassment trainings.
Thank you, Aubrey. Which reminds me, I'm due for mine, so sorry about that. On electronic onboarding, a lot of people are already using onboarding when you add an employee, but a lot of times people are just doing the work for the employees themselves, or for the employees, or still using paper. The electronic onboarding system is actually not as heavily used as it's intended sometimes. Like, it would be awesome if everybody just like let the employees do a lot of that work themselves, but sometimes there's either a mistrust of letting the employees do it, or there's like legacy processes that you have to follow on paper that you're kind of letting drive the entire onboarding process. So from this side, it's probably the best centralized system to reduce a lot of effort that you have to do. We see this as kind of like the head of an octopus that touches like a lot of different points of the world, like from the ACA, from benefits to setting up contact, to I-9s, to passwords, to e-verify. All of these things kind of flow from onboarding, and this system can keep track of it. I think one of the least leveraged features on this platform is our custom forms and acknowledgement system. You can actually link those to your onboarding process to best reduce the amount of effort and time that you have to use on like physical pieces of paper and making sure they're collected. And then Resistance, like we haven't seen as much resistance again from the employee side. It's more of like just getting in contact and like making sure your onboarding process works. One thing I've heard from a lot of people who work at companies, like not just using eBacon, but from other ones, is like, oh wow, onboarding is so difficult. It's like it's such a big lift. Um, but there's a lot of different ways that a lot of systems have it out there, and it's just a matter of like sitting down and like and scheduling time, which we're going to talk about later on how to get that into in the system properly. And then lastly, I'm going to move on to two HR features before I let Aubrey go, since unfortunately we have only 30 minutes. So, and I can talk a lot, so I'm trying to not make it so mean to Aubrey. Training. This is a newer system that we have. This is a central location to keep employees' knowledge up to snuff. So the training system is brand new. We use it here at eBacon as a way to train our sales team. So we've actually put all of our sales materials inside of there, and the sales team actually goes through a whole process where they take the training through different courses, and then they actually have quizzes that they have to take at certain time periods. So they might go through five trainings, and then they have like a 15 or 20 point quiz that they have to go through and score a certain thing. And if they don't score right on that, or they score low, then the management team will actually sit down with them and go over what they got wrong and talk through it with them. This is really best with it actually works really well with the employee review system, which I'm going to talk about next. But it also helps a lot if you've got a lot of training content already built. Let's say you have a bunch of PowerPoints and Word documents and all these other things that you've already designed. This system is great because you can import those in and then assign those to employees to track. Least leverage feature, roll up knowledge quizzes. So as I was mentioning before, you can actually create like a quiz of quizzes almost, and just assign that out to the employee. So you can have them take like let's say you want to give them like a 20 question quiz on like, how well do you know HVACs, or how well do you know this? You can create that and then get that quiz after they go through specific trainings, and then see how their knowledge is leveling up or going away, right? And the resistance managers, honestly, I'll be perfectly honest with you, everyone wants training. Every employee will tell you the one thing they want in life is more and more and more and more training. No one knows what great training looks like. And then on the other side, managers have just a very hard time actually like getting things into a piece of paper. And like when people say they're busy, the first thing that they kind of dump is training, right? That's just the first thing that gets lost. So there's actually a lot of resistance you're going to face from managers and then from employees. And one thing on the employee side we did was actually give you the ability to have the employee rank the training, so that you can actually see if it's actually valuable to that employee or not, right? So if you put training together and every employee is saying 1 out of 5, this is terrible, well, that will give you some feedback on if it's actually helping them or not too. So it's kind of helpful. And then last thing is employee reviews. Again, a new system, so not as leveraged, but if you have any paper process today with employee review process, either the manager's doing or the employee's doing a self-review, this is actually a fantastic system to use. One of the biggest resistance is just most companies don't have a review process. I talk to a lot of businesses and they say, we'd love to have one, but they don't really have one in place. And then purpose, honestly, a lot of reviews get used or done, and then no one really knows what to do with them, right? And I think that one thing that I'd say on like when resistance happens is sometimes there's a so what with reviews, and like you have to really have a process of reviewing the reviews to see if it's actually working properly. Otherwise, they just don't get done, and the employees don't care. And I could do a whole whole half an hour just on how to handle that better, but um, that's kind of a major resistance we see. Least leveraged departmental reviews. You can actually have employees review like new employees who got on board. So let's say you have a team of shop people and you're like, I want to see how this new person's doing. A lot of times we just ask the manager how they're doing, but if you wanted a better peer review process, you could do it from there. So this is cool and all, but how do you implement it? I'm gonna let Aubrey go, but I have one more, because even though I said 7, I'm gonna give you like a hateful 8 type of thing. I even put 8 pigs and hats in here. And then I'm gonna give it to Aubrey, but site access, another new system already turned on for you. You can keep on top of digital security and see who has access to third-party websites. much like the asset system, this is just a matter of putting the sites that you give access to employees into the system when they get hired. And a lot of times, like the problem with this is more of the fact that like your people who are giving website access are not you as the administrators. Typically, it's like a manager might give it to them. So your resistance might be just kind of setting that up and getting it working properly, like saying like, okay, what managers need access to the screen so they can actually record that somebody got access to a website. Otherwise, it might not necessarily go as smooth as you like to. So Aubrey, sorry to kind of take an extra slide on you there. I knew I threw that one in
No
there
worries.
because this is the Wild West. But let's jump into what to do, what to start with. How do we get
Well, of
ready?
course, this is this is a change, right? Like if you aren't utilizing these features, it's going to be a change for your business. So one of the things is to set aside time for yourself to really focus on implementing these changes. And I'm going to tell you, for me, I'm a calendar person. If it's not on my calendar, I'm not going to get it done, right? So I put everything on my calendar. So for people out there looking to implement these new features, please just set some time on your calendar. And then next, we're going to go through how to go ahead and get it started. So if we go through and see, there's some people that may or may not be resistant to the change. What ends up happening, and I've seen it in many companies, is you start with one person or one group of people to start with the change, start using assets or start using the scheduling feature. And then what happens is they start using it and say, hey, oh my gosh, this is so great. It's totally improved our lives, and start telling other people. And so then you can roll it out to everyone, and they're getting all this positive feedback. So it's much easier to get acceptance of a new process when other people are talking about it like it's so great. And then next up, we want to talk about how are we going to, like, how are you going to manage this, right? So a lot of these companies joining here today, a lot of our customers, they're not huge corporate companies, right? So it's something that you kind of want to take some time and be the person that goes through and implements these changes. And then you're going to be the hero because everybody's going to be talking about, oh, it's so much better now that we're using these. I have so much more time on my hands. And then you're the one championing that change. One other thing that I kind of wanted to talk about is if you have questions about how is this going to impact your business in more detail, we can answer those. But then also, how do you get it going? Like if it's a feature that needs to be turned on or you just need training on it, you can always go ahead and contact your customer service rep, your payroll person. And then we also have our customer service manager, Laura Fonger. She's an amazing asset and she is so helpful. So you can contact either one of those people and be able to help get you started. Alex, do we got any questions?
Yes, we do. And then we have a couple questions and a couple comments. And I actually wanted to read a couple comments because one person mentioned I got to go the right way, um, from asset management, how they keep track of, oh my gosh, I got to go through this properly. Um, how they keep track of actually flu shots, and in some states there was a requirement on some jobs during COVID to keep track of the actual receipts or the actual COVID things themselves, the actual shots themselves. And you could use the certification system to keep track of that, and then you could run a report to see who had that and who didn't have that. And then they were mentioning that like having that kind of flu shot there helps them keeps the sickness away a little bit on that side. Um, if you're having, like, one question was like, is there any help screens on the scheduling stuff? If you are kind of like curious on scheduling, feel free to reach out. And for the person who asked that question, I'll reach out to you. Maybe we can schedule some time and I can show you how to use that platform. And if there's enough interest in scheduling, I'm happy to kind of just do a whole webinar on just that itself. Um, On asset management, can you track keys easily? It's hard to know who's got a key and who doesn't. I could retrieve them upon employee leaving and save the cost of rekeying. Yes, so in the asset management system, you can actually create different categories. So you can if you go into the pick list management screen in the company screen, you can create a category of just like key. And we've seen people like use that to just assign a key out, and then that gives them a notification that they have a key. But then when you're terminating the employee, it tells you that when they're being terminated, which assets that they have, and then lets you kind of identify when you get them back, or if you've gotten them back or not. So keys are a great thing. I've also seen some customers hand out like track out their like let's say they get like a key card for a job site, and they're like, hey, Alex has this key card for job site X, and he might have 3 key cards or 3 badges or something like that. We want to make sure we're keeping track of those so that they leave, we know we've gotten those things back from that employee, and they don't have access to a job site they shouldn't as a terminated person. So yes, you can use that, and it's just a matter of actually creating a it's just a what I'm trying to say. It's just a matter of setting up a category and tracking that. You can use that. Um, When you pay expense reports on eBacon, does tax come out of the reimbursements on the paychecks? So most expenses are non-taxable, but if you have a taxed, like for example, if you have a pay code that is a taxed expense, then it's just a matter of like when you go to the create an expense, you can have that show on the list, and then when they choose that and it runs into payroll, then it would tax it properly for you. But which ones would those be, Aubrey? Like, have you found a lot of expenses that are taxed on their
Yeah, a
own?
lot of times like people have, like a well a phone allowance where it's a little bit different than an actual expense, but or something like a per diem where it's taxable. But those are typically things that people aren't sending in receipts for because when you're actually purchasing something for the company, that is a non-taxable reimbursement.
Yep. So there's ways you can do it, and like it again, it's based off the pay code the employee chooses, and then in the time screen before you approve that expense, you can change that pay code as need be, or you can go to the employee's profile and choose expense and change it. Question regarding scheduling. I have 2 questions. Can you put in time off in advance? And if someone calls it sick, how's it handled? So, great question. Our time screen is automatically syncing up your sick and time off requests. So you don't have to, like, so long as the employee's putting it in, or you put it in for the employee, it will show up on the screen and show you that they're off on that day. That allows you, like if you're looking at the schedule and you see, oh, like, like Aubrey calls it sick. Aubrey's my like example today. Aubrey calls it sick all the time. I've got her scheduled for all these jobs. Well, I can now drag and drop and move those around because I see Aubrey has time off. But if it's like, let's say that Aubrey is going to Connecticut next week and she's off the whole week, then when I go to the scheduling system, and since she's already put that request in properly in the future for the future time she's taking off, I will see that on the schedule. So it's there. Holidays are also now integrated to that too. So you can see if there's a holiday in that specific day for your business, because some companies don't have like, oh, July 4th, of course it's a holiday, right? But you might give them the day off before or after too. That's going to show up on the schedule going forward. Um, and for some businesses that do prevailing wage work, that might also mean that you're going to be paying a lot more money on that day. So you might want to like use that as a note as far as what you're scheduling, that kind of stuff. Does the schedule integrate with your time card, especially applying towards prevailing wage work? So great question. The way that the scheduling system integrates with our time features, our time card features, is that in 2 ways. One is that if you're using the real-time time attendance, you can actually turn on a button in our system with the help of our team to limit the schedule to only what they're scheduled for that day. And then the second thing is that on the actual time screen when they're clocking in and out, it will tell you if there's a variance between what you're scheduled to do and what you actually did. So there's a couple ways that it integrates in as it goes downwind. And then there's some other variance reporting and stuff that you can get on that side. I will tell you that some of the stuff that we have planned for the scheduling system is to give you better tools to manage, like, okay, how many apprentices do we have? How many journeymen do we have? And we really wanted to come up with better ways for you to kind of like get that preemptively, if that makes sense. And so look out for like the next couple of webinars on some of those features that we're putting in there for you. And we do have a lot of questions. So one question, will recording be available? Absolutely, we'll send it out. Thank you on the scheduling stuff. Is there instructions on how to upload reviews? We can put something together and send it over to you, or like set up some time and show you on that one. And we have a lot of questions, and sometimes we have no questions, but this time we have a lot of questions. So I really appreciate everybody giving me questions. And if you just want to type stuff in and throw it to me, I've got time if you've got time. Is there anything in the works to be able to attach a photo to the mileage request? Not today, but if you want to email me that specific request and let me know what you would attach to a mileage request, we can take a look at that option. As far as alternate work weeks on the schedule, I had a request here like a Thursday to Friday work week. I appreciate that request. I'll put that in as far as making sure that the schedule reads to that same time frame too on that side, on that one. So if there's no other ones here, for anyone who asks a question like help on a specific thing or ask for like specific like how-tos on that, we'll reach out to you and like either schedule some time or send you a couple of pieces of documentation there on how to do that. If anyone has any other questions, any more questions, you can throw them in the chat right, or throw them in for me and Aubrey right now. But otherwise, thank you everybody for your time. And Aubrey, do you have anything you want to end with?
Yeah, so like I said, things, if you're not utilizing these features, they can be a change, but we can help you through that. And if you're like, I don't really know how to approach this with my employees or whatever, we can kind of talk through that. So if any of you have any questions about it, because I've been doing this for a long time, you can reach out to me and I can walk you through the steps of integrating everything into your business. The other thing too is just a reminder on if you have questions, of course, me and Alex are here, but your payroll CSR and Laura Fonger are available to help you as well.
Yep. One last question I had here. Where do I find the review section? It will be in your company screen. Like you go to company and then type in review in the search box. If it's not there, just send us a message and we'll turn it on for you on that one too. Same thing with the training on that side. The widgets for the employees for training and for reviews are not on by default because it's a newer feature. We didn't want to turn everyone on having those. So if you want to use reviews and that kind of stuff, you'll want to reach out to us and say, hey, turn those widgets on so we can start like having the employees do it. But I'd always recommend like with reviews or training, you play around with it first, make sure it looks good, and then turn it on for like a small group, as we said before, and then start rolling that out to your whole company. We're even at eBacon, we're slowly rolling out like reviews to our internal staff, and like my team has them where other teams don't, and we are constantly playing around with like what's the best way of doing this to get the best information that actually helps us run our business. So, and again, if there's more interest in that, like I'm happy to kind of like either share the findings that I've seen on managing a team or giving more training on any one of those things on that side. So, but thank you everybody. Appreciate your time and all your support, and can't wait to show you all the cool new things we're going to have out pretty soon for you here too. So
thanks all.